Coming up on the Mind Caddie.
I've always been quite fascinated with how the mind works, especially in sport. Found it fascinating. And at the time, I was sort of in the app space, sort of learning to create apps. And passion is golf. And I just thought, you know what, imagine taking what Carl is teaching and just giving it to the masses, just smashing more balls at the range is not going to help because, as we all know, the pressure of the range isn't there.
Mind Caddie.
Hi, Ben. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Pleasure to be here, Carl.
Yeah. Well, the podcast is the Mind Caddie, and you're definitely the brains behind the Mind Caddie app. And I thought it was only appropriate after all this time to get you on the show and talk about it. Obviously, you're a golfer yourself. What was the sort of genesis of the idea in the first place for us to put an app together called Mind Caddie?
I can't remember how many years ago it was now. It must be
about 6 years ago, maybe.
About 6 years ago, yeah, when I first... ultimately, I'm just a average golfer, just play at my local club, play competitions, fall in love with the game, fall out of love with the game, all that sort of highs and lows. Done lessons, bought loads of equipment, all that sort of stuff, spent God knows how many hours on YouTube. And I think I was very lucky at the time. I was working in golf and I was at an event and I happened to be talking to a player who mentioned you and kind of the work you'd done. So I just obviously classically Googled sort of Carl Morris, discovered your work and sort of broadly the mental game. I'd obviously heard of like Bob Rotella and all that sort of stuff, but never really dove into it. Discovered your work and I've always been quite fascinated with how the mind works, especially in sport. Found it fascinating. And at the time, I was sort of in the app space, sort of learning to create apps. And passion is golf. And I just thought, you know what, imagine taking what Carl is teaching and just giving it to the masses. Was sort of the genesis of the idea. And then, I got in touch and you thankfully responded.
And here we are all those years later with many iterations. But it's amazing what it's now become. What do you think? We've had this discussion many times, Ben. What do you think from a club player's perspective? What do you think the resistance still is to looking at the mental game?
Look, every time I play golf now, especially if it's in a competition, I use it as sort of market research with the other three players to find out, would they be interested in this? Because obviously one of the questions you always get is, what do you do? And broad strokes, it always comes into sort of one of the following responses. You either get people who give you that look of this is just positive thinking nonsense, and just sort of immediately dismiss when I say it. There's then probably the bucket of golfers who are obsessed with technique, swing coach like YouTube, but have started to sort of, they ask a few questions. What's that about? How does it go about that? All that sort of stuff. Who I guess for us as a business are then kind of like the sweet spot of trying to educate them that the mental game is as important as swing. And then you've probably got the much smaller group of golfers who realise how important the mental game is. And when I've spoken to them, they've then like lit up. The rest of the 3 hours is always talking about, what we do, all that kind of thing. And they are much more in the niche, definitely becoming more of them. But they're broadly the three sort of buckets. It's either this is a load of nonsense, I'm just going to practice my swing, sort of semi-interested because they've tried loads of other stuff, and there's people who are kind of at the place where I need to get involved in this.
Through your own experiences with it, of sort of getting involved in us together, what would you say? How would you say you view the game, the mental game, differently now from when you first perhaps had a look at it? What are sort of the practical elements that you found most useful?
Yeah, I'm in quite a privileged position because I get to speak to you and I get to obviously listen to all the content you provide for the app. So I'm fully
not sure that's a privilege to listen to everything.
There are people that then find you and follow you then would call it a privilege because it's amazing to kind of unlock your brain. But there's two hugely distinct things that I know has completely changed my golf. One is, and I'm going to actually use your language because I'm so absorbed in it, but it is this idea of acceptance. I used to get so effed off when I'd hit a bad shot that could easily spiral into then, oh, I'm going to go for the hero shot, or another bad hole. Oh, I've made double bogey, right, round's over, game over, just and then. That has completely changed now. No matter what happens at what stage of my round, I am pretty good at just remaining quite calm. And I'd say the other bit that I've noticed as well, especially when playing with friends, when it gets competitive, is it sounds quite ego, but I have the mental resilience that I know I'm going to stay strong in the moments as it gets down the stretch and stuff. And or even if stuff, I might be losing or whatever, and if I'm playing match play, I still have the positive that things can change. I don't ever give up. But it's really that sort of acceptance and resilience has changed massively. And then that's translated into scores. Don't get me wrong. I sort of have my own personal goal, which is to try and get down to scratch so I can just play in an open qualifier. That's just sort of my goal. So I was still concerned about my scores and my handicap and all that kind of stuff. And I'd probably say from when I met you, I think I was about 10 or 9 as a handicap. I've now dropped to 4.2. In that time,
I wasn't even aware of that. I wasn't even aware of that.
Well, I keep it quiet because then you want to play, and then maybe the pressure might be too much. But yeah, I think the main thing that's happened with that, and I'm not discouraging it in any way, but I've had no lessons in that time. I've had I've had some new golf clubs, but it's just simply been the consistency. And if I go onto like my England golf and look back, very rarely do I shoot. I never really have worldy rounds where I'm shooting, say, subpar, but I never have rounds where I've gone above 84, 85. So it's always in a tight window of like mid to high 70s to like low 80s. And I think that's the testament of just, the holy grail you and I spend ages talking about, consistency, which everyone tries to crave. But that to me is the closest I've come. And yeah, so the scores have translated purely just by thinking.
What would you say your relationship to the game is now?
It's a good question. I still fall out of love with it in terms of, you put the work in and then you go out and you just have an absolute blow up, or, you just don't feel like you're playing to your potential. I think my relationship is definitely healthier in that I sort of know that it's about the work you put in will eventually pay you back. And I think that's also a thing of what we're doing as a business. Like, we put a tremendous amount of work into the app, both you and I. We don't, especially over the last 4 years, you don't see immediate returns on it. But I kind of go, I still love the idea, and you talk about it a lot, of, not mastering the game, but you want to kind of learn and sort of embrace the challenges that it throws at you. And I think that's been a big part of actually enjoyment. I think one of the questions you always say is, when you do stick it in the trees off the tee, it's then, what's the question, what's the golf course asking me? As I sort of now enjoy those, whereas previously I used to be like, oh, for God's sake, I'm now in the trees, game over, and get really in a bad mood. I've actually just enjoy, the challenges, and actually therefore you enjoy playing the game more.
And do you feel like you've got better? We've already said about the idea of consistency as being the big myth, and what we should perhaps be looking towards developing as adaptability. Have there been more and more rounds where you perhaps you've not got your A game, or even your B game is the reality for the best players in the world downwards, and you're just getting better at finding a way of putting numbers on the card when you're less than your best with your swing?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, hand on heart, cannot remember a round in the last 2 years where everything has clicked. I.e., I've been driving well, my irons have been good, my chipping's good, my putting good. It's just never happened. There's always one off, as in, if I was good at driving last week, it'd be rubbish then the next week. But definitely, like, I find, and I think this goes back to the point of like the resilience when I play with my friend, is I sort of always find a way to get it round. And again, it's something you've taught, I think, I'm going to quote you a lot, because as I say, I've absorbed a lot of your information, but it's like, making A game decisions when you've got your C game. I think that always stays true with me, is that, I don't go and chase stuff. I sort of do have a lot of, my irons today are particularly rubbish. I'm just going to maybe take 2 clubs extra and just sort of try and pat it down, or you know what. So I think it's that sort of thinking is definitely better. And I think Tiger Woods obviously famously said that he very rarely had his A game for any of his wins. And I think where a lot of us chase that, though. We can only score well if everything's clicking into place, which unfortunately is not the reality.
It's amazing, isn't it, how that myth, if you like, is still stuck so strongly. If I can just get the right technique, if I can just get the right information to start moving my body better, that information will protect me from the feeling that I get from bad shots. Where when you reverse engineer that, and you said you've developed your acceptance, paradoxically, when there's a cornerstone, a foundation of acceptance there is a freedom then that creates, which then does allow you to access more of your actual skills, whatever those skills are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's 2 key things that sort of transformed how I thought, which was, me, I love data, hence why I work in technology. But I love data.
I hate it. It's quite a good combination. Yeah.
And it's quite a unique blend, because obviously kind of what you teach and the stuff, it's not necessarily, you can't put it into an app of like, well, this is your mind score as much as you try, and all, it's not like a club head speed and all that kind of stuff. But I do love data. So I use the Arcos app, which obviously sticks in the end of your golf clubs, gives you a lot of data. But interestingly, I was obsessed for maybe 3-4 years that I was poor at golf because I could not drive the ball. That was, as you would say, the story I constantly told myself. Then probably about 18 months ago, I shot under par for the very first time. And there was 2 things in that. One is I had a 6'4" a par on the 18th, which would have meant I would have broken par. If I'd missed it, it would have meant I would have made par. And I made it. And there was a lot of sort of, I guess, belief in, go all the processes and stuff actually under the biggest of pressures that I put on myself, because, not a lot of golfers get to break par. I did it. But the interesting thing was, in that round, on my Arcos data, it was the worst driving accuracy I'd had for my previous 12 rounds, right. Which therefore completely dispelled the myth that I was only going to be able to score well if I could drive well, when actually my best ever round on the par was when I had my worst fairways hit. And those 2 sort of pieces of information completely sort of transformed how I then approach golf, going, I don't need to be playing perfectly off the tee or perfectly from the fairway. You can still get a good score if you sort of do the best you can.
It's interesting you touch on, which is a cornerstone of what we talk about in the app and development. It is the idea of a story, that not just golf, whatever it is in life, we're all carrying around a bunch of stories then, and we'll pretty much live out that story because it becomes our reality. And I think, what you've just described there is a perfect example. As long as you keep carrying that story around with you, you could take endless lessons in the short game or putting or whatever, but if the foundation is a story of I can't do fill in the blanks, unless you're looking at the fact that you've constructed a story, that story will keep playing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't mention his name, but I have a good friend who we're very competitive with one another. And he, to be fair, is a bit sort of dismisses the work that you and I do, or you do and I do in the app. Like, he's never really taken it seriously, but obsessed with buying clubs, swing changes, tinkering, all that sort of stuff. And it's very interesting because when he and I play one-on-one in match play, he's still never beaten me. But when we're playing in a group of 4, he normally wins. I mean, I call him like Scotty because he's really dialed in. But then it's when he and I are one-on-one, they're normally quite close games, but as I sort of know the pressure of me sort of sticking in there and not drifting away is going to get to him. But yet he still won't entertain the idea of working on his mental game because he doesn't see it as a tool. And I always think if you had that in your locker, you'd be such an amazing golfer. But his story is, if anything, if I don't beat Ben, something's wrong in my swing. I hit that one bad shot, that therefore it was all down to my swing. Therefore, I better go work on that if I want to try and beat him.
It's also interesting what you said there, and about the myth that what we talk about together is anti-swing, because it isn't anti-swing in any way. A big part of the app is about, if you are taking golf lessons, what is the best way of making any swing changes from a brain perspective, because just by being told what you're doing in your swing is not going to make it change. There's processes within that to actually get to move the club better, and things around impact and things like that. So I think that's another thing that I think is important that we keep reinforcing. We're not saying work on one or the other and the swing is all wrong and the mind is. It isn't. It's a combination of the two. But I think from what you've just said there, look, if you're missing one part of it, the mind side of it, you're missing a huge opportunity.
Totally. And I mean, you're like, again, we've spoken about this loads, but kind of, for the lack of a better term, mantra has always been, the swing gives you the skills and then the mind allows you to access those skills when you need it. And I think that's the key point, is that, look, if you're technically awful, then, you're not going to start shooting well just by thinking better. Like, it's just not going to happen. But I think when you ultimately, as every golfer can relate to, you can always pick a moment in a round that means a bit more, pressure's a bit on, difficult tee shot, or whatever it is. There's always something and that's where most of us, if we don't have the skills to access the swing that we know can get us through, it will go wrong. And then you immediately just go, well, it was the swing. And I think that's the key distinction between, there's a lot of talk, always of, as you say, either or, it's got to be, it's all down to your swing. And it's like, of course your swing's important, but if you can't access that swing when you need it the most, then that's, just smashing more balls at the range is not going to help, because as we all know, the pressure of the range isn't there. So it's a super important point that we're trying to marry the two together. And as I said, whilst I haven't really had any lessons, I've also, I think partly with you gone, I'm 38 now, I've got 2 kids. I don't have the luxury. I'm lucky enough to go play golf.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury to spend hours changing my swing at the stage of my life, right? And I kind of gone, what I've got doesn't look particularly great, but it does the job. I don't need to have a slightly better, look at the top of the backswing or whatever. And I think that's another bit that sort of people chase, is that, you watch the professionals on tour and whatever they call it, the compression and how they're like down. It's like I also don't have the physicality to be able to rotate the way they do. And I think even just things like that get what you've got. If there's a big fundamental issue, get it sorted by a swing coach. Otherwise, sometimes you can just do a lot with what you've already got.
And you mentioned time there and working on it. What have you found? What are ways that you've been able to work on it away from golf? Things like, obviously you're listening to a lot of this stuff because you're involved in the app, but from a practical perspective, most people are in your boat, aren't they? They've got families and kids and responsibilities and work and things like that, and they can perhaps play once or twice a week and maybe go to the range an odd time, but they've certainly not got 12 hours a day to work on the game. What have you found? When have you listened to the stuff, and what have you found the best time for you to listen to stuff and maybe absorb it?
I always listen to it on the way to, like, if I'm playing in a competition or whatever, I always listen to it in the car on the drive there. I think that's a really good one. I think for me, outside of working on the content, I think it's just, if I'm watching golf or a conversation, something pops up, I know the content very well. I sort of just have a little dive. And I think for me, not to brag because we built it, but I think the AI version of you has been tremendous for me, because there's very niche or specific things that happen to each individual golfer when you're actually on the golf course. And I find I've done it a few times when I'm on it, just playing like with myself, or actually when I finished golf and those fresh things are in your head of maybe where you didn't quite do so well. I like asking you specific questions in the AI. Previously I could actually WhatsApp you, but now I just need to ask your AI. But I think that's really helped because it gives me then, okay, well, what sort of objectively do I need to go away and work on, not just what I'm feeling about. I think, and also like then sort of separating it, the bit I've noticed that changes the scores more than anything is short game.
Right.
I think, I spend probably most of my time listening to your content around stuff like putting and wedges and all that sort of stuff, because that's really, and if you ever play with scratch or better golfers, you soon realize, I used to be scared of playing with them because I didn't want to look stupid in front of them, but actually I started playing with them more and more. And what you learn is they're equally as wild off the tee and hit really bad iron shots, but my word, their short game's phenomenal. Like bunkers, most of us would go, God, if I could just get out and then try and get a couple of putts, great. They're up and down, no problem. Anywhere around the green, up and down. And that's, again, when you play match play, it's super sort of draining. But that to me is like anything. I spend a lot of time around short game, both practicing because it's easier to practice. You can do it in the garden or whatever. And then, sort of I use you a lot basically after a round and whatever's happened that day.
It is a bizarre experience with the AI. Just on that, broadening that point out, and obviously, you're an expert in this field. What do you see? Let's obviously focus on golf. What do you see happening in the golf industry, coaching specifically, with AI, the pluses and the minuses, the sort of benefits and the challenges of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite lucky because through my network and sort of contacts, I'm getting quite a good insight into kind of where it's all going to go. And obviously AI is playing a massive part in it. I think personally, without sounding old, there's a danger that it becomes even worse than it is now in terms of data-led rather than, as a lot of people would say, including yourself, feel creativity. It becomes all about the numbers because there's a lot of stuff around 3D AI using 3D modeling of your swing that they can then feed into coaching apps. Well, then they tell you exactly what you need to work on and do wrong and all that sort of stuff. And I think that runs the danger of going against, I mean, you might say I'm biased, but in my humble opinion, what actually works of the stuff that you teach, like creating intentions and clear things and then letting your body sort out the movement, that runs the risk of degrading that even more if people are then being able to see a 3D model of themselves of, it was my right shoulder that caused that slice and all that kind of thing. I think there's a danger of that. There's then obviously the positive, which is everything in AI. I think, AI Carl is fantastic. I think where I see that as great is for obviously people like me that know a lot of your work, but I still have very specific questions. I think it's a great entry point to sort of that middle bucket of golfers I talked about who are potentially interested in the mental game, but have no idea where to start. Yeah. Or what better way than to ask someone like you a very specific question of what they're struggling with. Ooh. And I think those things, and us, give a little bit of a sneak peek, we're looking to bring that voice element to it as well. Where they could actually, as if like having a phone call with you. I think that's where AI and technology is going to be amazing. If we're going to go on the other side, right? I don't think it's going to be great for the actual golf clubs and all that sort of stuff if it gets even more ridiculous than it is now. But most things, I always think there's going to be a split, right? And this is where the golf industry is funny, is that there'll be some who like to play the traditional way and go that way. There'll be the ones who probably chase the technology, which in theory would be me because I'm a techie person. But actually, as I say, because I've spent time with you, I sort of try and find the balance of using the tech, but then sort of appreciating the traditions of it.
Mm. And I think from a coaching perspective, to me, the challenge will be perhaps more and more of the technical side. People will farm that out, if you like, to AI. But as you said, the human side of it, the performance side of it, I think potentially becomes an even greater opportunity for coaches to work on, whether it's getting students, clients out on the golf course and looking at things. Again, so we're not ignoring the golf swing, but looking at other options other than the golf swing to actually work on, to enjoy the game more and actually play better.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't understand why every golf lesson isn't on a golf course. Like obviously, if you say, I've got a horrific snap hook, great, go to the range with the coach. There's clearly something that's causing that, right?
Yeah.
But if you haven't got the fundamental, one major issue, I just don't understand why every lesson is not on the golf course. And again, something you said in one of your lessons, which is stuck, and I probably tell this to everyone that I play with, is, let's be honest, most golfers chase distance, especially with the language that goes on in the professional game. It's all about how far can you hit it and all that sort of stuff. And we all think, if I could just get those extra 20 yards, that's it, unsorted. And I think you said, every coach should take, and I think some coaches do this, which is great, to go out and go play on the red tees or the junior tees, and you go, here you go, there's your extra 25 yards. And then golfers just realize, well, their wedges are worse than they thought, because they're not hitting 8 irons now, they're hitting a wedge, but it's worse. And I think that sort of realization is better telling to golfers, that they go and experience that stuff on the golf course. Or, where a coach would be great is they smack it into the trees off the tee. But then a coach is going to be excellent to tell, okay, well, how do you play the shot to keep it low under there to give you the best chance to get on the green? And then the mental side is, well, this is the better side of the green to miss. I'm going to aim for that, not go for the hero shot. And that to me should be coaching holistically. And it doesn't even involve any AI. And if anything, that as a golf coach should excite you more to take golfers out onto the golf course.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was just recently come back from Denmark, where I was asked to do a presentation there to the Danish coaches. I mean, over there, they've been so successful in the last few years at producing an amazing amount of players. And you sort of ask the obvious question, why are they doing so well with that? And I think obviously the fact that they work indoors most of the winter time and they can work on technique. But what seemed to really resonate with the coaches was this idea that maybe instead of being swing coaches, we actually become more shot coaches. And it's something Gary Nicol and I have talked about a lot. And I think if you're a shot coach, again, get out on the golf course, and no matter who anybody is and what level at, you're going to be able to teach them some specific shots, as you just said. And at the end of the round, they don't ask you how many swings you've made. They ask you how many shots you've hit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, ultimately, it should just be called coaches, right? I don't know why we go swing coaches, mental coaches. Like, it's coach like for golf.
Yeah.
And I think there's that holistic approach. But yeah, I think that's the thing, I'm guilty of it, right? You go to the driving range, you bash 20, 30 balls with a driver, hoping that I'll hit 5, 6 in a row straight, and then think, all right, I've solved it. But then the one that doesn't happen, you do end up in, you have to try and draw it around a tree or whatever. If you don't know how technically to do those shots sometimes, then you're then going to score badly, but then you're just going to go, well, it was down to my driver. And I think, again, some of the most fun I've had on golf is when, you obviously don't care is a bit strong, but, you might just be playing with a few friends and there's literally no thing. And actually, sometimes you just mess around and you go, do you know what? I'm just going to hit a smacking high, try and whack a draw. Doesn't matter if I then block it out or I go too far and I smack it into the water. Like, you're just having fun. But it's amazing sometimes what you can uncover, like, just by not really knowing the technique to it. You just go, I'm going to try and whip this around a tree. And you do it and you go, oh, right. Yeah, I can't then tell you what I did. I can't tell you what my arm positions were in and stuff. But actually, I think probably a lot of golfers would realise if they went out and just, then I'm just going to go wild. They'd probably realise they've got quite a lot of shots in their locker without even realising it.
Just unleash some of that creativity that, is tied in knots if you're trying to be perfect with everything. Ben, fascinating conversation. I wanted to do this for a while. I didn't realise how much progress you'd made with your own golf, but that's been nice that you've kept that very quiet. For those perhaps sitting on the fence, obviously Mind Caddie podcast, we're talking about the Mind Caddie app here. What advice would you give for somebody who's perhaps sitting on the fence? They haven't tried, they haven't tested. What's the sort of entry points? What should folk do if they fancy giving it a real go this season and experience some of the things you've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, two things for me. I mean, this obviously is going to sound like a sales pitch because it's our app, but I would say there's 2 things I always advise any golfers that email me after downloading it, because one of the things is I always say, if you don't know where to start, there's 2 things that change my. One is in the program is called the Fundamentals program, which is completely free. You don't even have to start trials. People can just use it, and I think it's a 6-7 part series that you produced, and it's sort of the fundamentals around golf stories. And I think that was the thing I remember listening to over and over again. It really resonated with me. So I think always start there because you'll recognize your own story. And then I think try out the AI. So you can start a trial for 7 days for free, then just cancel it immediately if you want, but it's completely free to use. I would just go into Carl AI and whatever even if the question is, I'm new to this, I don't know where to start, or I think this is a load of nonsense, but I'm willing to give it a go. Like, just ask AI Carl and then see what you come back with. And the beauty of that is now for certain questions, we can suggest lessons within the app. So if you say, I'm really struggling with the yips, well, actually now we've got a full 6-week program that you can do on the yips. So I would just say, listen to the fundamentals course to sort of get a sense of how your teachings and what the mental game is all about, and then just play around with the AI car. And then from there you can go, yep, it's still a load of nonsense, I'm not interested. Or you might go, that's an interesting way to think about it. And with all of it, I would say, unfortunately, like whether you do anything mental, I'm not a psychologist, but whether you do meditation or all this sort of stuff, it's not going to be the swing. You're not going to listen to one of Cal's lessons and then suddenly drop 5 shots. Like, but I know from speaking to a lot of golfers who use the app, if you consistently stick with it, even in like a few rounds, you'll notice a difference if you can start practicing sort of even that little switch in your head when you think you're going to go for the hero shot and you go, actually, no, I'll just accept this situation and go. You'll be surprised at how quickly you can just drop 2-3 shots without even doing anything different. So that would be my advice. And, I'm always available if people are struggling or want extra help. It's kind of why you and I did this, is just to help golfers. Because I was one, discovered you, and I thought, let's just help some more.
And the First Protocol App Store website, what's the first?
Yeah, I'd go straight to the App Store. So you can get it for Apple and Android. Just download it. You create an account. It'll actually present that fundamental program to you immediately, so you can just dive straight in. And then if you want to try out any of the programs, any further lessons or AI Cal, there is a 7-day free trial. As I say, you can cancel at any time. But yeah, just go straight to the App Stores and you can download it from there.
Ben, brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
Cheers, Cal. Thank you very much.
Mind Caddie.